Welcome to Podkey Fantasy Football, where camp hype meets roll math and regression checks. A lot of August fantasy takes sound confident because they skip the hard part. The hard part is separating talent from usage and usage from wishful thinking. Jackson Dart sitting around QB 17 makes more sense once you strip away the early rushing quarterback excitement and look at the environment. The bearish case here is mostly structural, not anti-talent. If the Giants really are shifting under Matt Nagy toward a more physical, slower, run-first offense, then pass volume shrinks, play-action chances can shrink with it, and fantasy quarterbacks lose easy paths to ceiling. The biggest swing factor is the rushing touchdown profile. Dart had 9 rushing scores last season, but a lot of that came from goal line usage, including 4 carries from inside the 3. That matters because short yardage quarterback rushing is one of the least stable fantasy stats when the coaching staff changes. Nagy's history matters here. If he avoids quarterback runs near the goal line, then Dart can still be mobile without being fantasy rich. Scrambles help, but designed red zone carries are what really move the needle. There's also a trade-off people sometimes miss. If those rush attempts disappear, the injury and concussion exposure tied to that usage can come down, but so does the upside that made the player exciting in the first place. So the downgrade to the mid-QB2 range isn't saying Dart can't play. It's saying the most fantasy-friendly version of his profile may not exist in this scheme. The Tre'Von Henderson versus Ramondre Stevenson debate is a good reminder that ceiling and reliability are different bets. Stevenson has the cleaner efficiency case right now, more explosive run credibility, stronger yards after contact, and fewer issues with missed tackles relative to Henderson. If touches land in the same neighborhood, the back who creates more stable yardage tends to be the better fantasy wager. Henderson's appeal is obvious. If the role breaks perfectly, the payoff could be bigger, but that's the point. His case needs more things to go right. That connects to sophomore running backs in general. Year 2 backs do not automatically level up just because the calendar turned, unless there's real role expansion. More third down work, more goal line work, more snaps. Regression is very much on the table. The sharp way to handle sophomore hype is conditional optimism. Bet on the player if the usage is growing, not because progression is supposed to happen by default. Terrell McMillan is a useful test case for how fantasy hype can drift away from what actually happened on the field. He and Jalen Coker were around the same target volume, roughly 6 a game, but the fantasy output wasn't close. McMillan was around 9.8 points per game, Coker more like 14.1. When volume is similar and production isn't, you need a better explanation than raw talent projection. Maybe that explanation arrives this year, but the obstacles are real. Carolina may have offensive line issues at both tackle spots. The early schedule looks rough against quality pass defenses, and Bryce Young's usage tendencies at times don't automatically support every receiver archetype equally. The slot discussion matters because the easiest bullish counter is usually, well, they'll move him inside more, and sometimes that does happen. We've seen physical wideouts jump from around 15% slot usage to around 40% under aggressive play callers who want mismatches. But slot alignment is a tool, not a guarantee. It only matters if the play caller actually features it, and camp reports keep repeating the same story from independent angles. So with McMillan, the smart stance is open-minded but unconvinced. The path exists, but the current production gap says the burden of proof is still on the breakout thesis. This is the right time to treat every camp report like a hypothesis, not a conclusion. One glowing note from one beat writer can be useful, but only as a starting point. If the role is real, it usually gets echoed by multiple observers over multiple practices, and ideally it shows up in different contexts: rotations, red zone work, third downs, 2-minute drills. The opposite is true too. Contradictory reports are not always hidden insight. Sometimes they're just noise from a small sample or a practice-specific plan. A simple aggregation habit helps. Put the notable camp items in one place, compare them, and wait for repetition before moving rankings in a meaningful way. That doesn't make you late. It keeps you from paying full price on someone else's first impression. Seattle is one of the more interesting offense versus volume puzzles. They were low pass rate and still scored plenty, which is a good reminder that efficiency can mask limited volume for a while. The problem for fantasy is that last year's raw scoring doesn't automatically transfer when you add a rookie quarterback and a new coordinator in Brian Fleury. That introduces more volatility, and volatility is especially dangerous when drafters anchor on prior team totals. That also matters for Justin Jefferson. If Fleury changes route concepts or red zone emphasis, Jefferson can still be elite and still regress. Those are not conflicting ideas. If recent touchdown totals and yards per catch were helped by the previous coordinator's structure, then repeating the exact same fantasy line becomes a tougher ask. For Brock Purdy, the upside projection is easy to see. In a strong offense, 4,400 to 4,500 yards and 35 to 37 touchdowns is not crazy on paper. The caution is that big projections often flatten over the weak points. Purdy's injury history matters, and so do the gunslinger moments that push interception risk higher. Good supporting personnel and smart game planning can reduce that exposure, especially if the offense controls when deep shots happen, but they don't erase it. Matthew Stafford is the cheaper version of this broader conversation. Drafters look at a 7% passing touchdown rate, call it unsustainable, and discount him into the late rounds. That's a fair concern because touchdown rate does regress more often than not. But the stronger pro-Stafford argument is not that 40 touchdowns will definitely repeat. It's that a quarterback with proven spike season history, when surrounded by enough talent, probably shouldn't be priced as if the ceiling disappeared. Jadarian Price at roughly RB27 feels less like a talent verdict and more like a market shrug. That can be useful. ADP in that range usually means uncertainty around role, and uncertainty creates upside if the early season workload breaks his way. If he becomes the primary back out of the gate, beating RB27 by a lot is very live. Christian McCaffrey is the opposite kind of bet, because the talent and role are already established. The real question is how much weight to give the workload warning signs. More than 400 touches at age 29 is a legitimate concern. Heavy red zone work compound downs that, and pretending those touches don't carry forward would be sloppy analysis. At the same time, the bullish case has substance too. His conditioning, preparation, and body maintenance aren't empty narratives if they've helped him sustain elite play. The fairest conclusion is increased risk, not automatic decline. Jeremiah Love has a cleaner path-based case. If the competition for early snaps is limited, the floor can be top 20 at running back simply because volume is the hardest thing to find. And if he keeps goal line work, then the ceiling pushing toward the top 10 makes sense. At an ADP around RB13, you're not stealing him, but there is room for profit if the usage arrives. The Cardinals' defense is one more practical tiebreaker to keep in mind. If Arizona remains near the bottom in points allowed, yards allowed, and pressure, then opposing backs and receivers get cleaner fantasy environments, especially early when matchup planning is more straightforward. That's the edge this time of year, not predicting everything, just being stricter about what actually deserves belief. Thanks for listening to Podkey Fantasy Football. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm. Podkey.